So my name is Melissa Malcolm King. Thank you so much for being here today. Before we begin, I just want to let you know I am hard of hearing, and unfortunately, my hearing aids are broken. So I am using a lot of accessibility to help facilitate me hearing you. If at any time you cannot understand me, please raise your hand. I'm more than welcome. I'm more than glad to repeat myself so that we can all be on the same page. Okay. So Also, just for those who are not aware, this meeting is being recorded. So if you get up to use the restroom or take any human necessities, and you walk behind Eduardo who's sitting back with the glasses on, your image will be captured. So if you don't want your image fully captured, I would recommend walking kind of further back toward the wall. Okay, so without further ado, we're going to get started. Is everyone ready? So I want to warn you now, you'll be moving around a lot. There are and we'll get to that in 1 second. So let's get started. So first of all, we're going to center ourselves on the purpose of this meeting today. And we are gathered in this room to champion accessibility, promote representation, and empower individuals of all abilities. This conference is a space for learning, collaboration, and innovation as we work together to remove barriers and create a more welcoming world. Let us embrace this opportunity to share our experiences, amplify our unique voices, and drive meaningful change for the disability community. So before I go into my presentation, I have these little cupcake things on the table. We're going to be doing a lot of group activities and a lot of communication. If you're someone who doesn't care, you don't want to participate, you can just turn this over and I'll make sure not to call on you or invite you to participate if that's something that you're not interested in doing. We will be discussing some sensitive topics, and so I invite everyone into this room with spirit of respect and dignity into the things that we will be discussing. Okay, some of guidelines of discussion. Okay, so we're going to start with a little activity. So there's a little some paper in front of you if you didn't bring any with you today, and we're going to talk about identity. So each one of us claims for ourselves a title, an image, a connection to something higher than us, perhaps, and that is what we perceive to be our identity. And that identity then affects how we engage with other people. And so often in the work that we do, we develop biases based on how we feel about ourselves. So, in other words, we have the facts and empirical knowledge of our profession, but then our emotions get tied into past trauma or interpersonal relationships that have failed, and then we develop a bias on that situation. And ultimately, it's based on our identity and how we feel about ourselves. So, what we're going to do to start off is we're going to write on a piece of paper that's in front of you a word that describes identity. Is it race? Is it your age? Is it your profession? Is it the amount of money you have? What identifies you? And if you're done with that, you can go ahead and write down what do you think of identity when you think of someone else? So if you're done, you can raise your hand, put the finger up, so I know. Yeah, person over here, done. 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. 7. Okay, looks like most people are done. So I want to give you a few minutes and turn to the person next to you and share what you put down.
I'm over here like that like I identify as someone. Anyway, so like this time. Nice to meet you. Sorry, I would be right in. And then for the other, how I see other people as an identity, probably not the right way, but I see as like someone that's independent. That's what I got. My we're so best friends, grandparents are dead. I was some exposure. Yeah. So I didn't. Oh, yeah. Right now, like resources. What about like when I live like
How's the bed?
yeah. I would like.
So it's taking a little.
They're not.
It's good.
Yeah. I always notice that someone else, I'm biracial, so I.
Yes, it is.
I hope that
Working at.
that actually kind of. Or.
Stay there.
People have arguments. So more, so right.
Second.
That like further. Like I don't think.
Yes.
So did anyone want to share what they wrote down? Talk about? I'll wait a few minutes. Yes, go ahead.
So the first question, identifies me. I was talking to Carla and, her experience was totally different than my experience. And it made sense of why she answered the way she did. Then I answered the way I did. How I engage with others. I kind of leave the room. I try to lead with curiosity. When I enter a conversation or a room, I try to do it with curiosity to stay open. So I would hope that I identify myself as just a curious adult, really.
I like that. Thank you for sharing that. And also you said you saw something from someone else's perspective, very important. Was it that later? Anyone else? Yeah, before we move on? Oh, yes, go ahead.
Share mine. So for mine, I, funny enough, identified as my disability. So I have arthritis. And so I identify as someone who has arthritis. And
Yeah.
it's kind of my whole identity because I also work for the Arthritis Foundation. So it's kind of
Oh, wow.
all me.
All encompassing.
Yes.
Okay. Yes, go ahead.
You go. Yeah, I feel like we talked about how like we often
I don't know, it's some part of, it could come from within, like kind of what we learned in the introduction section, that we are so much more than one thing, right? Or
Yes.
one aspect of our lives. And so, but then Noreen shared some of her personal experience with her daughter as well. And just, oh, in the world, we define um things by color, by
People in
race,
boxes.
in boxes, yeah, but
Boxes.
but we are so much more than just one thing. And sometimes like it's just how we feel, how we think, all of that is part of that identity. And so
Yes. And that is called intersectionality. So thank you for bringing that up because we'll talk about that later too. Go ahead if you have something you wanted to say.
Oh,
Yeah, was your hand raised? It wasn't okay.
oh no, I was just, we were kind of working together, but I guess one thing I was, telling Dana is, I used to do some teaching over at Horizonte School, which is very multicultural.
Listen, like, I know I go be like, okay,
Yeah, and one of the exercises I did was, I'm not jumping ahead too much, but it was on how do you identify? And then we just had lists of things and like different posters around the room. So it's like,
Yeah.
okay, you identify this, go touch that. And so we just kept doing it, going down the list. And then at the end, the point was like everybody was always moving, right? So it wasn't just one thing. It's like I'm here, I'm there now. And to see how like all of us identify differently. So like, Deanna was saying is it's just not one thing. It's how we flow, how we're thinking, how we're in that moment, in that setting, whatever.
because it almost like a web that connects one onto the other rather than a linear perspective. I appreciate everyone's comments. Does anyone have one last comment before I move on? Okay. Yes, right there.
Yeah, so so my initial response was mother. And I know there's many others. But as an Indigenous mother, I think the lived experience is a little bit different, to the general population of mothers. And so looking at it through that lens of, either race and ethnicity or just the lived experience of an Indigenous mother.
Right. That's very true. Because to me, the word mother is not just about someone that gives birth, but that's someone that mothers other people. So that's very beautiful. Thank you so much. So the next thing we're going to do is we're going to watch this video, and it's going to dive more into identity and our perspectives on it.
Welcome.
We're sure glad you're here.
All right.
Get comfortable.
Take a deep breath. And let's imagine.
What comes to mind when you think of the word identity?
Female.
Hispanic.
Buddhist.
Transgender.
Things that help us understand who we are and where we come from.
African American.
Gay.
Asian.
Muslim.
Indigenous.
The way you think about yourself, the way you are viewed by the world.
Heterosexual Pacific Islander.
White lesbian.
Cisgender Mexican.
Black male. Were those some of the things that came to mind?
Did blind?
Or deaf?
Or lupus.
Or depression?
Or black male COVID-19 long hauler?
Or white lesbian wheelchair user?
Or any kind of disability?
Well, for many of us, disability is an identity.
And a community and a culture.
Both a socially constructed identity
and also an identity that people choose and even celebrate.
You see, disability is a natural part of the human experience.
Not a problem to fix.
Or an issue you can choose not to focus on.
So, why is it important to see it this way?
I'm going to stop right there. So why is it important to see it this way? Or to view it this way? Yes.
Well, like we just had our legislative session, for example, and I think, each year there's, something that comes up in different ways, DSPD is a big one, or, all the legislation that can have an impact on people with disabilities. So important to focus on that as a culture, as a way of life.
So what I'm hearing you saying is that it's important to focus on it as part of the everyday life, not just as a holiday or an event. That's very true. Does anyone else have anything they would like to share? Okay, so we're gonna go ahead and move on. So we've already talked about this a lot. So if we don't have a lot of commentary, I can move on. But the question is, how does exploring identity affect bias in how we see the world around us. So think about how you see yourself. How does that affect how you see people around you? And then how is that in turn cause bias?
Okay, I know in my life with my mental health disabilities,
Talk a little bit about it.
I know in my life with my mental health disabilities, it has helped me to have more empathy for those who have experienced or are experiencing those same disabilities that I have. Whereas prior to my experience with that, I felt like I was kind of naive and almost overly like, oh, it's all gonna work out, and rather than listen and understand where they were coming from. And so now I am a part of that community. And I have more empathy for that experience. So
I like that. So what you expressed is the opposite of having a bias. She found empathy in the process of learning. Very good. Anyone else like to share? Oh, see, I got quite a bunch today. Okay. So we're gonna go ahead and move on. So now we're gonna play a little game. Again, anything that I'm offering, if you don't want to participate in it, you have a right to say no. Okay? So we're going to play a game called Put a Finger Down If. So I'm gonna invite you, we'll do 5 fingers for the sake of time. Okay, so I want to make a few statements and then you put a finger down if this ever happened to you. So number 1, put a finger down if someone ever touched your hair that you don't know. Okay. Put a finger down if someone judged you because of your disability. Put a finger down if someone said that your name was exotic or they could not pronounce it. Put a finger down if when you go to the store, someone asks you to be a babysitter or a nanny or other household servant. Put a finger down if people said that your accent was just too strong and you should speak English. Put a finger down if I lost my thought. Put a finger down if you were not included in a workplace conversation about cultural competency. Okay, so I want to take a look around and see. Now, there's some people that have all the fingers still up. Some only have a few. Does anyone has none? I'm just curious. I can't see. Nope, I don't think so today. However, this is a good activity to demonstrate that when we go through life and we have our different identities and different intersections, it affects how we go through the world and how people perceive us and the biases that we receive. So now we're going to turn the topic a little bit. Since this is an intersectionality conference, that's one word, I'm just going to briefly go over intersectionality before I move on to the rest of the presentation. So what is intersectionality? Intersectionality involves 3 basic things. 1, identity. How do you see yourself? How do you see yourself in the world? How do other people see you? 2, and because of that, what kind of power or privilege do you have? 3, because of that power or privilege, what outcomes in life or what contextual factors will you face in the future? So the practice of intersectionality is 1, recognizing the different demographics with which present on the wheel here, but also recognizing those who have power and privilege and how they can help support those who are marginalized. So for the next few minutes, I'm just going to go over a few statistics to give you understanding why these kinds of meetings are so vital and so important. So first, on the rainbow side here, we have the level of disability prevalence in the LGBT community. The level of disability prevalence in the BIPOC community, as you can see, is quite high on both sides. However, it's estimated that only 1 in 20 services that service these populations fully meets those needs. In terms of ADA needs, in terms of cultural competence. And so as you can see, there is a disparity there. Next, this pie here is showing the lack of care received by individuals based on demographic. So we have the general population, which is represented in gray. Those people of color and those that are disabled are in red. The LGBTQ and disabled population are in purple or blue. And people of color and also our LGBT community are illustrated in green to show you how much of a lack of care that's being received amongst these communities. Over here, which unfortunately the closed caption is covering, but accessibility, it's showing you the comparison of that to a person that's non-disabled and that identifies as being cisgender on this chart. I wanted to show you this so that you can have a visual of why you're here today. And I know some of you are here because you're a student, because your job says you have to, because you need some credits. Okay, let's be honest. I'm not judging. Listen, I'm judging. But anyway, however, I hope that you put that in the back of your mind that the work that you're doing here today is going to help humanity. Okay. So we're going to do a little activity here. And this is called What Would You Do? And so you're gonna pick a partner, not the one next to you, because you already know the person. And I'm gonna put a scenario on the board. Then your partner will discuss it. I'll give you a few minutes. Then you're gonna switch partners again. I'll have another scenario, and there'll be 4 scenarios all together. So please move as quickly as you can if you're physically able to do so that we have time to cover all 4. Okay? Are we ready? Yeah, here we go. Ready, go. Partner that's not next to you. Yeah. Remember, someone has a. They don't want to. Okay, here is your scenario. That I want you to think carefully because there's a lot of context here that I purposely left out. I was being vague on purpose so you can think about it. A colleague's oxygen levels and blood pressure readings are at dangerous levels. You believe they needed medical attention, but your boss suggests the issue is due to the colleagues not taking the medication and even implies that they chose to get HIV. What would you do? Ready, go.
I'm gonna get a new one. All right. No, I'm. Yeah.
The situation. I think if the same question was asked 10 years ago, 20 years ago, probably might have a different approach. Now, I think it's part of the and evolving process of society. There might not be part of demand.
Sorry. Sorry, how did it go?
I can think another chair.
Why? I've never seen such thing.
Them too.
Okay.
Interesting, but it might change. Yeah. The same question is asked. Like, let's.
I know why.
Where's it?
Levels of blood pressure and things. Sure. So before I move on to the next scenario, does anyone know why I chose to put oxygen levels and blood pressure on here? As an example, there's a reason why I do that. So the reason is, aside from the other bias, which is clearly evident, oxygen pulsometers and blood pressure cuffs have been known to not be accurate for people of color. That's when they did the studies, they exclude that population from the study. So that's why I put that in here as a side. Okay, all right, are we ready to switch again? There you go. Oh, let me read it first. Yeah, okay.
I know. Like.
Scenario. Lord, remember, just macaroni and cheese is not appropriate for holiday parties.
You wanted to be. It might be. Like, there's like, it's nice, and then like, that's like one of the only things I would ask her. I don't think it's free. One thing that everyone.
Understanding.
Doesn't.
There's no way. We hate that. That's sometimes we.
Okay, so. I want to see why this.
It's also because that's what I is that competition. You know, when you are up, you are real. You know, what is the kind?
Do anyone tell me the contact macaroni and cheese?
Butter? Butter and milk?
That's part of it, I guess, but
Dietary.
yes.
And it could be the holiday, like what is the holiday? Is it a cultural holiday? Is this because there's certain holidays where you don't serve certain foods?
I'll tell you one thing, in my house is always mac and cheese, but okay, I digress. Anyway, but also I put this as a reminder that some people who are neurodivergent, they have food sensitivities as well, and they might not really be able to eat certain foods. So it's a full consideration here. Okay. All right, are you ready for the next one?
Yes.
All right. I'm gonna read the part and go. So the next one is mental health. A disabled woman of color is observed repeatedly patting her head, and a colleague suggests they may need a psychiatric evaluation. What would you do? There you go. But
Maybe it's like.
That's interesting.
Sorry. Just.
what the time is it? I forget.
You're good. No worries. No worries.
But I can be gone. Yeah. It would change.
Yeah.
Maybe it's like part of it, like Right, yeah.
Other people might have been. Papa around on it. Exactly like this, but. Not very. I mean, I'm just thinking like. Program. Right. Yeah.
It happens.
Right. If they're doing their job, why is this? Why is this an issue?
Yeah. So that's a good one because by the relationship.
Yeah, we were just talking about like,
A little bit louder, please.
yeah, sorry. We were just talking about how, one, it's not the colleague's place to even say they need a psychiatric evaluation. We don't know if this individual, that's how maybe they're stimming, or that's how they self-regulate, or that's how they calm down. Like, it's not our place to even begin trying to be Dr. Google, right?
Right. Exactly. Does anyone else have any other thoughts? Yes, right there.
Maybe it could be some sort of communication. They're trying to communicate something they want, or maybe they're reacting in a certain way. And it also could be maybe if they're a woman of color, maybe, and they have a different language that they're communicating with. And so maybe it's a communication method.
Very good. You got all of them. Anyone else? Yes.
A lot of times we just try and guess why they're doing something. Why don't we just ask them?
Thank you. You got it. Yeah. That exercise that is one of the ways that we can limit advice is to get to know a person and to communicate with them to understand what their needs are instead of making a judgment. Thank you, Frank. And also, by the way, as a side note, sometimes you get a weed, you gotta pat it. I'm just saying. This. Yeah. All right, this is the last one. All of you decide you want to switch or not, because you need to watch. Okay. The last one. Kelly, by the way, the reason I picked these scenarios because they all have happened to me at some point in time, just to give you a reference. A colleague is wearing a religious head covering and another staff member instructs them to remove it before entering a shared workspace. What would you do?
And if for me,
Having that conversation. Sometimes when you just jump the gun and be like, it's like, oh, create that contention moment. Because there's more other tapes. How come I want to like that conversation work? like something like you still
When you actually.
it's like something that just like asking them,
Your time.
like but it's I feel sometimes.
Anyone like to share what they learned from this exercise? Again, what anyone like to share what they learned from this exercise?
We don't need that.
Okay, no, different here.
No.
You said that, like, first of all, we would give that person the opportunity to advocate for themselves before having to step in. And then obviously, if it escalated or if they felt uncomfortable, just go over and kindly, what's going on here? Can we help understand what the situation is?
I like that. So giving the person a platform to advocate for themselves, that's a very good point. Anyone else like to share? No, right back there. Yeah, really loud for me.
I will. I'll try. I have a high tone voice. I thought it was interesting because I have a lot of experience with veterans, and I could definitely see this coming up, both from a bias, but also from a cultural perspective. And so then it kind of it feels a lot like disability too, like accommodating one disability might be in conflict with accommodating someone else's disability. And this is like a cultural belief. So it was really interesting to think about.
Thank you. So I think another point. So sometimes when thinking of accessibility, we're thinking through a very narrow space. And so sometimes we accommodate the person's need in one area, but we forget the need in another area. Right? Very good point. Thank you so much. Does anyone else want to share before I move on? Well, I hope that before I move on, that you learn something from this experience, and that as you navigate the world, that each of us has not only that we have different experiences, but those experiences mold who we are and what we will become. So just keep that in mind. Okay, I want to skip this reflection. Okay, so now we are going to talk about contextual factors. Contextual factors are things in society that present a barrier to a person in achieving a goal or having a high quality of life. Okay, so when we think of contextual factors, there are two thoughts. So the first one is the focus is on crossing the finish line in the race. That you have to be the fastest runner to get to the end of the line, and that is your goal in life, because you want to cross the finish line. The other perspective is that you just feel honored to be able to run the race that day. You feel honored that day you can go outside and see the sunshine and walk a few steps because you're in the race. I don't think that either philosophy is wrong, but I feel like that in life we need to have a balance and find a realization that each of us is either running the race or focusing on the finish line. The issue comes when we have both people together in the same race. One side saying, well, if you just tried hard enough, and you can move fast if you tried, and then you have the other side saying, this is too fast, they're going way too far ahead of me. So that requires listening and compassion and understanding. So we're going to talk about some of those contextual factors. Okay, so the first part is access to essential services. It is estimated that one out of every 5 persons with disabilities does not have access to equitable food, housing, or financial stability. And that rate doubles for those that are in the LGBTQ or BIPOC communities. I have a video here. This is my friend Sarah. We won't watch the whole video for time, but she talks about her experiences as a person that is disabled. And in her honor, because she passed away, I wanted to share part of this with you.
I was introduced to the idea of spoon theory. Spoon theory was a way to look at chronic pain and disability and how it affects the average person throughout the course of their day. The idea behind spoon theory was that each person is given a bundle of spoons at the beginning of each day, and as they go through their daily routine, they spend spoons. Get up and take a shower could cost as much as 3 spoons. Putting on shoes and socks, 2 more spoons. So you start to see that there's a certain amount of energy that goes into every daily task. And when you have limited energy, you start to really care about how you use that energy. Well, I get up in the morning. Okay. Next, I use the bathroom. But it's not that easy, is it? First, you have to make it down the hall. Sometimes you can't quite make it. You see, the spoons were an analogy for the amount of energy it took to get through those little daily tasks. But here's the problem I have with spoon theory. I'm that kind of person that uses the same spoon to stir my cocktail, eat my Lucky Charms, and then feed the cat with the same damn spoon. I was trying to come up with a better analogy. And that's when I thought of matchstick theory. You see, a match is a one-time use item. It burns for a certain amount of time, expends actual energy. And when it burns out, the energy it produces, much like my goat juice, is gone. You get up in the morning, strike a match. Watch it burn. Strike a match. And I really hope it's going to last till I get to the bathroom. Many mornings, it doesn't. That's okay. Strike another match. You see, the thing about matchstick theory is you don't always know what you're going to end up with on any given point in your day. There are some mornings you wake up, you go to get your pack of matches, and somebody has poured a glass of water over the entire set.
So I wanted to share this with you for you to have a greater understanding of what it's like to be in the disability community and not have access to these things on top of having that experience every day. Okay, so the next contextual factor is discrimination and racism. Now, I know that some people in this room may have varying opinions about this matter, but I can tell you that racism does exist. I live it every day. Even this morning, I was waiting today to come in the building. 2 security guards came to ask why I was waiting to be let in the building. So, discrimination happens to me every day. Where people are discriminated because of my hearing, because of my medical illness, because of my gender, I am discriminated against. And that presents a barrier in my education experience, in my employment experience, when I engage other people, because the first thing people see when they come in the room is not my education, it's not my experience teaching specification, it's not the fact that my family is in the military and we serve the country and they serve the country. They see me and owning a few of my identities. The next one is cultural and language biases. So this picture is a picture of what a cartoonist does in the beginning of creating a drawing. They have to look at the image from 3 separate angles in order to make a complete picture. And when people have cultural and language biases, what they're doing is they're only seeing the front part of the picture. Why don't you speak English? We're Americans. We don't do those things here. Cultural and language bias. Economic factors. So we talked about this earlier, so I won't spend too much time on this. But because of additional medical costs, additional need for mental health services, direct support staff, social work, etc., the cost of living as a disabled person is usually 5 to 10 times more than an able-bodied person. And again, that number is doubled when a person is in the BIPOC community or they're in the LGBT community. Okay, next one is called medical bias. So medical bias are people who have preconceived notions on how to care for a person that is a person of color, that's disabled, that's a member of the LGBT community, without using scientific knowledge or medical research. So, for example, I've gone to a doctor many times and someone said to me, "Oh, I guess your blood pressure is kind of high. Maybe you should lose weight. Maybe you should just try eating more healthy foods." When I have a blood disorder and my blood pressure is always elevated, but no one ever asked. They just see me. Another example is if someone's using an accessibility aid and they come into a space and they're seeking assistance, often the person that's providing the care will speak to the care provider if there's one, or talk to them as if they don't have the intelligibility to understand the nature of the room. Medical bias also is not treating someone fast enough because they feel the person is exacerbating the symptoms or exaggerating because they're a woman, and so they can't be just in pain. They have cramps or whatever the thing may be. So that's medical bias. Okay. For the sake of time, we will not do this group activity because I would like to be able to finish the presentation. However, would anyone like to take a contextual factor and tell me either have a resource that would help this contextual factor that you know about in our community, or a way that people could work on their biases as it relates to what we discussed? And I'll say it again for those who didn't hear me. So, for the sake of time, I'm not going to do the group activity. However, I will, if anyone would like to participate, and let me know. Either one, how you can avoid bias, or 2, something that you can do. Something that you can do, or research you can provide to us that would help alleviate these contextual factors. Does anyone have anything like this yet? Okay, well, let's keep going then. Oh, sorry, go ahead.
I found something that I think we all have someone in our lives that we love.
Yeah.
And we care about so deeply, right?
Yeah.
And I think about, as a human race, when we interact with each other, and again, I've had my fails of interacting with people to the best of my ability or in the best mood or whatever you want to call. But I often think that if you think about treating an individual, no matter their race, no matter their identity, gender identity, or cultural background or language difficulties, if you think about them when they come through to your office, or when you see them out on the street, or when you see them out on the store, and think about, this is the person I love and care about the most.
Yes.
How would your interaction change with anybody you come across with, regardless of their identity in general, right? And so I think sometimes if we kind of have that mentality, so much individually and as a collective group, so much of the problems we see today could be, I wouldn't say fully eliminated, but just they could be lessened than what we see today in our culture, and our society.
Yes.
If we try to think of every individual as that person we care and love the most. And then how would our interaction change with them? It would just not be what we typically, we wouldn't be as judgmental, we wouldn't be as rude, we wouldn't be as, whether internal or externally, right? I don't know, just might be a very bleeding heart kind of approach, but I think it works.
So what I hear you saying is that you feel that when we approach people in the world, whether we know them or not, we should see them as a family member, because they may not be our family member, but they belong to someone, and they deserve the same consideration and care and love as everyone else. Yes.
Yeah, well, maybe my sociologist background is gonna kick here, but I just wanna say that an important part, a critical part of community is interactions.
Yes.
We need to interact each other to learn from each other.
Yes.
If we miss that part, we are missing an opportunity to enrich and to learn from each other.
Yes.
And to interact and fully interact, because everybody has strengths, everybody has talent, everybody has many things to contribute. If we miss that part, the concept of community maybe is not getting to the at the maximum.
And Eduardo, you bring up an excellent point, because our ability to understand each other and to eliminate bias comes when we put ourselves in uncomfortable spaces. Now, a lot of people feel that they don't want to be in a uncomfortable space because then that requires a self-reflection, and they may have to change something, or they might have to engage in a conversation they're not ready to have. But until we can come together and be uncomfortable, then we can't have any change either, right? So thank you for that. So I want to switch gears just a little bit. And oftentimes when I give these presentations, people always ask, well, what can I do to support the community? What can I do to be a good help? X, Y, and Z. So I decided I would dedicate a small portion of how you can be the best support, whether that be at work, in your family, in the community, etc. So the first one is self-care. Because you can't take care of anyone else or help fight the cause or defend other people if you're not in a place to be able to do it for yourself. The next one is doing your own personal work. Okay, that means addressing both your explicit bias and your implicit bias by doing the work on your own to address the feelings that you have. Okay, next one is representation. So that simply means when you go to work, when you go to activities, when you engage with your family, what representation is there? Are there people having space? Are they being served with equity? When you have plannings for meetings or events, are these voices being included? Representation. Next is called the universal approach to togetherness. Now, there's a lot of people that talk about this table and leave a room at the table, gotta have a seat at the table, but it's much more than the table. Because the table, this is the invitation to be among other people. It's not giving a voice, it's not sharing concern, it's not listening to other people's point of view. So the universal approach to togetherness is not only am I at the table, not only do I have a place at the table, my voice will be heard at the table. Whatever issues are going on will become your issue at the table. If there's a justice for one person at the table, there's a justice for everybody at the table. Universal approach to togetherness. Okay. I'm gonna keep going. We'll come to some of these out. Okay. The next part is becoming an accomplice. So these are for people who are not in a marginalized group. How you can support those people whom you work with, or in your community, in your family, for whom you promote advocacy for. Okay. So the first one is examine. So again, we're going to examine our biases. We're going to examine our social circles, see who's missing. We're going to examine the world around us and decide how we're going to affect change. The next one is learn. Now, this is very important. I want to be clear on something here. It's not a person's responsibility as a person of color or queer or disabled to be your Google, your encyclopedia, for those who the age group, or anything else. It is your job as individual to take the time to do the work, to understand the issues that are going on, how you can best serve, and what that looks like for you personally. So learning is much more than this class that you have today. It's much more than going to a bunch of training networks that talk about culture. It's about how you choose to live your life every day. Next one, get comfortable in uncomfortable spaces. People who are marginalized, every space you go to is uncomfortable because there's always a constant judgment. In order to understand or have empathy, as someone else was talking about earlier, you have to be willing to go into the uncomfortable spaces. That means listening when people tell you, hey, you know what you said was not so appropriate, or this is an experience I had, let me tell you about it. And you listen with intent instead of saying, you know what, it wasn't really that bad. They didn't mean it that way. No. You get uncomfortable, you get comfortable in uncomfortable spaces. Next is accepting feedback. So if someone comes to you and expresses, hey, I would like to let you know that this matter was offensive, or that there was a situation that occurred where I feel that my rights were violated, or there was racism, you accept the feedback because you are not that person. You don't know how they feel. You don't know the experience that they're having. So therefore, you shouldn't be in a place of saying or giving advice, but instead you should be accepting feedback on how you can be a better accomplice. Okay? The next one is keep your antenna up and be receptive. Because my greatest fear in life are not those who are bigots who call to my face. My greatest fear are not those individuals who blatantly call me the N-word or say homophobic slurs. I don't fear those people because they have exposed themselves. My fear are those people who sit in the shadows and in silence while they go on and say nothing. Because that silence gives that one person power. So please be receptive. The next one is become an advocate. Now, advocate is not just someone that comes to a march that holds a sign when the news is around like, hey, I'm an advocate, I have a rainbow on. No. An advocate is someone that does the work to understand the cause and works in many different mediums to help empower people whose voices are not being heard. An advocate is someone that stands up, or I should be more inclusive. It's someone that when they're in a circle of people that have a discussion that says, you know what, this is not appropriate. You shouldn't say these things, instead of just being quiet and not saying anything because you don't want to offend people. An advocate is someone that not only builds a bridge, and another bridge, and another bridge. They want to know why there's a hole in the first place. They need a bridge. That is an advocate. Okay. Ta-da! It is not about you. Sorry to have be offended people, but again, it is not about you. So it's not about how many likes you have on social media. It's not about impressing your colleagues and saying all these facts about history. No, it is not about you. It is about giving space and community and love to people who the world has shut out. It is not about you. Okay, so we're going to go towards wrapping it up. So And that is part one. What have I learned today? What have you learned today? Yes.
Melissa, we have learned a lot, but I just want to make an announcement because of the time.
Yeah.
The lunch is already here, the tables are already here, so that section is already here. We can continue here, or also the other activities are already going on. So
Okay. All right. So well, I'm almost done, and then we'll. Yeah. So what have I learned today? Anything to say today? Okay. I want to keep going then. How can I make greater change? And if you don't want to say it out loud, it's okay. Just as long as you're thinking in your head, and we have the same thinking pattern, I'm okay with that. How can I confront and change my biases? How can I improve my workplace environment? Okay. And I think I will end on this note. So I believe that each of us live a life, leaving a mark that cannot be erased. And what that means is that you can leave an indelible mark on society, the things you do, the people you support, and then every day that you go out into the world. Because you are a person of value and you can share that value with other people. You can make a mark that cannot be erased. Before we go, does anyone have any questions for me before I dismiss the class out? Any questions? Any questions? Got a silent class today. Okay, well, let's keep going then. Okay, well, thank you so much for coming. And this is my social media. If you actually gain access to my full presentation, I will be more than glad to share that in my research with you. Thank you so much for coming.